Well, thanks for watching today. I appreciate you dropping by for another episode, or if this is your first one, thanks for coming by. A buddy came by a couple days ago and helped me run a bunch of boards through the planer, which saved me a ton of time to have them sitting and ready. I've got a couple of planks now of some sort of fir or something like that, and I need some storage on the front porch. Now I want to make it simple, and simple to me says a wagon seat or wagon bench type top. Now maybe not that elaborate. Some of these are very nice because they're made for butts, and if you got to sit in it all day, you're going to care. But a lot of these more decorative style or just traditional building style, simple garage building style, have the flat sides, and it makes for easy end panels. So I think that's what I'm going to make as a shoe organizer. I didn't want to build a shoe organizer. I hate building shoe organizers. I've built out so many closets years ago that I'd never like to build a shoe organizer again. But it's got to be done. It's just horrible. I can't stand that thing. It's an absolute eyesore. And then this thing over here that was supposed to be on its way to the donation center started getting used. Don't love that. But if I had a little shelf over this organizing area, I could at least put my bird seed bin, and my little bag of suet could go into a basket, and it wouldn't look like a nightmare up here. So yeah, I'm going to build that. And like I was talking about in the intro, wagon seats or wagon bench style, this is what I'm talking about. You know, just some dimension here, and you cut some shape on the side. It can be elaborate. You can cut holes in the backstop, whatever. I'm going to do it super simple because it's for shoes, and it's going to look better than what's there by far. But you see, it'll catch all your stuff from falling off behind it, and that's another thing, is not having stuff fall behind this shoe organizer and just turn into like a bunch of flip-flops full of mice in the winter when no one cleans it out in time. So I'm going to doodle that up really quick, and then we'll get to building, which sounds great. I'm not really trying to do anything amazing here. I'm just trying to kind of figure out how do I want it to be and start thinking about dimensions in my head. It's going to be about 5 feet-ish by the time I'm done with it, and it'll be however deep I can meaningfully get out of these planks. The one up there is 8, and I can take up to a foot behind that door, so you know, I'm just going to use these boards and come up with what I can come up with. I start right away with this piece that has knots. Now they're kind of big knots, but they're not the biggest knots I've got in some of these boards, sadly. This one's not going to plane very well either, because you can see how the grain line pops in and out of it, and one of those passing through is always going to get shattered, like you can see right there. So these will make great end panels. You know, I think I'm going to put this whole thing together with brad nails and glue, and then I'll probably throw some screws in it to stiffen it up, and I don't think I'm going to want to see the screw holes. So I think what I'm going to do is probably plug the holes and then cut them off with a flush saw and sand those end panels. So this made sense for the end panels. Plus you can show off the knot, and it's kind of cool. I like it. Especially once the weather starts kind of setting in on this and it gets a nice patina and dries out over the next year or two. It'll start looking great to have that knot in it when it ages. So these are going to be my end panels. Now I don't want to use that guide. I mean, the guide is nice, but I think I can cut just as straight without it. Now, I want to just let you know a little old secret, if you didn't ever have to work as a carpenter, is it gets old setting up jigs to cut things. Although it's nice in certain situations. For something like this, I don't have a compound miter saw or a telescoping miter saw here, so I have to make do with what I've got, and the jigs take just too long. I'm pretty sure I can get it as accurate without a jig or a track or something like that. Although tracks are dead precise, I get that, and it's worth the time. But if you just keep an eye on that line you're cutting and let that tail end track nice and straight, just keep it dead straight that first couple inches, micro adjust as you're pushing through that wood, you'll get a pretty good straight cut, because by the time you've cut a long enough groove, the back of that blade wants to stay in that groove too, so you're just making micro adjustments and moving through. It's not about speed. Nice and slow, don't get any tear out and cut through them. Anyway, you can see I'm starting to try to come up with a shape for the front of the saddle, or the bench. And this really doesn't have to mean anything, so I'm not trying to go over the top with it. Although I did bring it very far forward, as opposed to the one I showed you earlier in my little entryway, because I want to make sure that you can't push things off the edge too far to the front. So I'm just giving it a small detail, and we'll see how it goes. Again, I'm really glad I decided to go to freehand cutting. Speed square on the top, speed square on the bottom. Make sure your line is straight with your line. Just make sure it's right. Double check that squareness. And man, running that circular saw through is a lot faster. Now it'll be nice to have power down here someday. In fact, I could get the generator out now, but it's not worth it yet. I like this little Makita saw, and it's doing what I need. But the bigger the blade, a plug-in circular saw, you're only going to cut that much straighter, guys. Out with the table saw. I need to narrow some of these boards just so I can get started. So I think what I'm doing all these boards at was I was able to get 11.5 inches out of it total. So I think I'm bringing all these down to 11.5 right now. And then later I'll bring the shelves down to something like 10.5, because I want to put some sort of a back in a portion of this structure to give it a little more rigidity. Obviously if it's just shelves it'll be a wobbly mess and collapse on itself. So it needs something where I can put diagonal strength into it with fasteners. So what I've decided is where I'm going to put my shelves. I gave it a couple inches off the ground and then started with 8-inch gaps, including one 1-inch plank, which eventually gets milled down to like 7/8. But that is more than enough for a pair of shoes, and actually better than what's up there. And what's up there is working. So this ought to be better, slightly larger, and I'm going to make it about a foot wider than what's up there. So 5 feet wide. That's going to be great to have that kind of space up there. Maybe get some little baskets and store some of the other outdoors stuff that just kind of lays around and looks trashy. I've got the leftovers from the rips of these panels, trying to clean up the edges, and so I will use those as shelf brackets. Boy, if you want to build this thing easy, cut some ends, cut some shelves, and make sure your lines are straight, and bust screws through the outside, and throw any diagonal bracing on the back, and you're done. And it'd probably work. But I'd love if this would hold up a little longer, because why not? I'm already building it. Why bust through it with screws, and then in the end you're like, ah, it's good enough. Well, good enough's good enough, and I've built a lot of good enough stuff, and I'll build a lot of good enough stuff. But since this is kind of the big thing on the front porch, other than furniture, it might as well look a little more furniture-y. Just a little. Nothing special. It's still just going to be a wooden shelf. I probably won't even paint it. I'll probably try to get it to just sit out there and dry out in the sun. We'll just see what happens. The easy thing to almost mess up putting these in is you want to put these spacers where the shelves should be. So make sure you're transitioning down the width of your shelf material, of course, for these cleats. So I let these dry overnight. I didn't want to mess with them while anything was drying. I really want these end catches for the shelves to be able to catch, because This whole thing isn't going to have a back panel. I'm wondering if I even put in a straight leg for support in the back. I don't know yet. Now I'm going to go ahead and jigsaw these little things out of place. They really are small. This curvature really should be pushed back at least twice as far as it is now. At least. But I'm trying to get as much as I can out of these end panels without stuff falling off the sides. I did want to show something cool where there was a cut between these shelves originally and the boards are flipped. The grain lines tie in perfectly visually. Now, I'm not a big fan of templating like this, at least. Templating's great, especially if you're going to keep making something over and over. But I don't like tracing dimensions. I like measuring dimensions and drawing out dimensions. And I'm just so used to doing it. But for something like this, there is nothing wrong with just tracing it. It's two boards, get them close, cut them out, sand them even closer. There's no need to get out all the circles and the tape measure and try to reproduce this with some math. I can just trace it. It is close enough. Now, because I have the luxury of having an air compressor running on this generator down here, I can have a little blow nozzle. And even though it's going to get a lot dustier, it's nice to always promote getting as much dust as you can off the workpiece because, you know, keeping it cleaner makes it easier to work on, and in the end, there's less to clean off of it. So that's fine. I will blow it off with some air, and I want to check how deep I can make these shelves. These boards are 95.5 inches long. Didn't quite make the 8-foot mark at the sawmill. So what I'm going to have to do is cut these all down to 47-inch length shelves, which is what I did. And the width is going to be probably around 9 inches here. You know, then I can have the width of another piece in the back, which will make it 10. Ah, shoot, let's just make them 10-inch deep shelves, minus what's in the front, so I believe 9 3/4 ought to do it. Well, I got to do some sanding here, and I'm not excited about it, but that's fine. Some of this still needs sanded anyway. The fronts of these panels are a little rough, but I wanted to leave them just a little rough to leave a little bit of the sawmill type profile in it, because that's always fun once the wood really dries out. I'm going to try to sand any of the pencil marks that'll really show as well, but dang, these stinking curves, man. If that jigsaw leaves those rough cuts, I'm down there hitting it with a file and whatever I can. And of course I'm going to take some of the chatter out of those end panels, and we are ready to go. And by ready to go, I mean I want to do something a little more interesting to the bottom of the end panels. I think I'm just going to make simple legs. So what I'm going to do is take the hole saw and go ahead and just punch some sort of radius in there and connect it with the circular saw and the jigsaw. Now, anybody who's worked with hole saws knows that hole saws can be a pain in the butt. And yeah, they are kind of a pain in the butt. They really heat up fast and have to do a lot of work, and, you know, but they burn stuff, man, and it just takes a while. You got to be patient, keep it clean, get all that crap out of those teeth, because after a while you just trash them. And take your time, let it cool down. Don't dip it in water to cool it down, because you run the risk of warping that tool if you do it enough times. I could have almost done this on the bandsaw, but I don't have a bandsaw blade thin enough to make that cut right now. So that wasn't going to happen. But man, this thing is burning up. These darn hole saws. Just sometimes. And you know what? You can't blame the hole saw. It's really the pitch in the wood. It's something in that pine or that spruce that's just gumming up like burning sap. And the hotter it gets, the more it spins. And it's pretty funny, actually, because you get all the way down to the bottom and pull off these stacked pieces of wood and get to that sacrificial board under there that's supposed to help me from getting tear out on the other side. Look at that. It's like it just had something rubbing in a circle on it, right? Because it did. It didn't even really start cutting into it, and I was pushing pretty hard there. So that shows you how gummed up the teeth on those get, and your best friend is just keeping them clean while you cut. But I got those radiuses in there now, and boy, that seemed like a big deal. Now I'm just going to cut them straight with the circular saw and the jigsaw to clean up where the circular saw can't cut all the way in. Now these plunge cuts can seem really intimidating, but they aren't. They're not bad. You hold back that fence, that protective cover for your blade there, and you get that thing planted, kind of make a few practice drops before the blade's even spinning, and just take a shot at making it as straight as you can. Slowly work those teeth into position and make that line, and then push forward until that blade is just about meeting that hole, and you got to stop. You've got less chance of kickback on this as long as you take your time than you do just using it regularly, because this cuts a perfect straight line for the blade. So that's pretty great. Don't be too afraid of plunge cuts, and you should look up some YouTubers that are way better at it than me. But I'm not going to spend any more time explaining a plunge cut. What we are going to do is finish cutting the rest of these holes to the feet. Just take your time. There's no hurry on these. And honestly, I could have just even gone twice as fast as that. This does not need to be super accurate. Although, why not? Everything's cut straight. We'll get it close. But especially without some sort of a drum sander or a belt sander to really get into the diameters there, or radiuses, or circle-y areas, I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm going to get about as far as I can sand, lightly. I'm just going to mark out where I want the front of the shelves. It's easier than putting the back in right now, because I don't know how much back I want to put in. I'll probably only put in as much on the back as I need to feel like I've got enough stability to keep it from getting pulled over by shoes and gravity. Well, it's finally time to brad a shelf into this thing after all that time. Thank goodness. Just got to square up the corners and start shooting brads. Now, like I said, I'm going to use end fasteners later in this project somewhere, probably screws through the end panels. And you might be saying to yourself, why don't you just get to the screwing? And the reason is, when I glue this, it's holding the things that are glued in place while the glue is setting up and I'm getting ready to move to those bigger fasteners. So on something like this, I don't really care if it dries out and you see brad holes. It doesn't matter to me at all. If it was an interior piece of furniture, I might treat it differently. I want to make sure that this top board is really drawn tight to the side panels or end panels or whatever we're calling them. So I like to use this square set here. It's basically like a corner clamp that makes sure that things stay in 90 degrees. So very useful. It's not going to mess you up. You're not sitting there with a speed square all the time. I like it. But you can see here how I like to use them to draw in a little gap. Even though this is just some patio furniture to collect shoes, might as well close down those 1/4 inch gaps. No need to deal with the slightly warped wood ruining its future. We'll just get a good fastener in there, pull it in tight, and finally we can start getting to putting on some sort of a back panel for the wagon bench that I've been talking up. I'm just going to go simple, nice and flat. I got to see if these scraps that I have are the same width as the shelf boards, but that is looking good. Look how good those shelves are looking, and it's pretty much a true 1-inch thickness. This is pretty thick sawmill lumber, and I just planed it down until about here. So this is a sturdy little shelf. I'm trying to find a good chunk. I almost put that big eye in the backsplash of the wagon bench, but I decided against it and used a clean piece of wood. That will be fine. I'm going to throw some glue down here because this is, I think, the only thing I'm going to put in that is any form of diagonal support. And it's not much. So the bracing that this will have to do will be slightly significant to keep it from falling over. So I want to glue it and brad it together as much as I can. And the back of that board was so resiny, and it just glanced all the brad nails out the back. So I'll have to pull those in a little bit. But dang, now it's coming together. It looks great. The top really looks like a nice little bench seat. I like it. I think it's going to be exactly what I wanted in that spot. So it's fun to have something from your head turn into something you can touch and actually use the way you'd imagined. So that's nice. I'm using the drill to just move a little material out of the way so that I can put fasteners in a deep countersink, and then I'm going to use pegs or dowels to plug those holes, because I haven't done that in a long time and it sounded fun. I use the straight drilling block, which I'll link in the description, but at least I can use my hand drill and get straight holes. Now at some point I'll get the generator noise under control, but for now it's running off the compressor and it's always loud and it's always messing with my audio. So I apologize if the audio hasn't been so awesome this go around, but it's the best it can do right now, and so whatever. But I think the next one I'll have the issues worked out and we'll have some better audio again. Anyway, you can see I'm on the other side of the shelf and I'm using that little straight drilling block, and I've got the little blue flag on the drill, followed by then driving screws into the sides of the shelves at well marked and measured places, as you saw. And this will really pull it together and stiffen it up. And that's awesome, especially when I pull in and stiffen up the backsplash. Now I need these pegs, right? I don't want to go buy dowels. I have this little dowel cutter thing for my drill. I'll list that as well. This company makes some great little tools. I wish I was sponsored, but I'm not, obviously. But they plug up if you go through the side of the board, right? Well, that's because that's not where you're supposed to be taking these dowels from. Treat it like a dowel, go into the end grain, and it's pretty easy. Nice, cheap way to make plugs. So I like having that in the weird bits and attachments organizer. I'm just going to make... Boy, I think I needed 12 on each side, 10 on each side. So I'm just going to make a bunch of them. Slice that little dude off with my circular saw, and a bunch of good little plugs there. And the Swiss cheese. If you're ever doing anything with wooden plugs like this, it's kind of a fun point to get to, because banging the plugs in is fun. Maybe if you're a boat builder or something, that's not so fun. Something where you use a lot of dowels, I don't know. But I always like this part. I think I may try to do something later on this year with actual dowel joinery instead of having the screws. But we'll see. I just wanted to cover this up in a way that wasn't looking at screw heads. Well, I need to let those dry for a little while, and I'm just going to wipe all the extra glue from around them. But man, I need to clean up. I have no usable work surface other than that sawhorse and 2x4s and pieces of plywood that I'm working off of right now. I need to build something I can put the table saw at the end of and make it into a big outfeed table workbench, so I don't know, I'll figure it out, but not today. Now that these have dried for a few hours, I can finally sand them off, and I'm glad to be doing it. Just getting everything pretty flush, and we'll see what happens as it ages. But I like that. I like the look of the dowel. One final run through just to get any rough edges or anything like that off. And of course those couple nails that glance through, get those out of there too. Give it a final brush off there, and it's time to finally move it up to the house, I think. Maybe tomorrow morning. I'm very happy with how this turned out. I maybe would have made the legs a little bigger and not cut them so close to the front and back, but I think it's fine. I think that it looks like the wagon seat top I was thinking about. I mean, I'm happy with it. It's going to be such an upgrade, and it's sturdy as a rock. But you know, shelves sag over time. So I took a cutoff from one of the shelf boards, and it was a nice width, and I thought, boy, they're pretty strong. I should just make some legs to support the back of these. The top will have at least the support of its back, the backsplash that's all tied in with it. That'll help it to keep from sagging, but these shelves have nothing. And I thought by the time it's got storage or shoes on it, you're not even going to see these supports anyway. So I opted to put 2 in. The cabinet's about 4 feet, so I put these in about 16 inches from the inside of the end panel on both sides. And that makes it nice and easy and symmetrical. Not horrible. They won't be too noticeable, especially nobody's going to be laying on the ground looking at it on the porch. Yeah, that looks great. They don't stand out a lot, and the added storage won't make it a problem.
You guys got this. That's beautiful. Look, you guys are the greatest. Beauty. I'm just going to run it like that. I'm not going to finish it.
Well, that's always the question. Are you going to finish it? And as far as I'm concerned, it's finished. I don't think I'm going to put a finish on it, although I'm warming up to the idea of putting like a bit of a whitewash on it or something. Or my wife may want to paint it a really fun color. She always has a great eye for some strange color I wouldn't have ever thought of. I'm just starting to fill it up with anything that's out here, and it's holding it pretty well. A lot of space left. And some of what's on there right now is going to be going to another location. So that's great. A ton of storage. Looks good. Sturdy as a rock. I love it. It's not that horrible canvas thing that was up here. Now we can enjoy using this front porch area, and I'm sure that my wife will enjoy seeing it when she comes home from a little trip she's been on. I think I need to move on to the carport next for some extra storage out there so that we can get the whole front of the house tidied up. Maybe that'll be next. Well, I hope you had fun watching. It was fun to build, and I'm glad I could share it with you. Please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. The comment section's great, and subscribing's great as well. And liking the video is good, so why don't you just do all 3? I appreciate it. But I do really love talking in the comment section, and so if you want to, go for it. Send a little message. Love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. God bless. See you on the next one.